Okay, let's check to make sure we're online. And we are online. Okay, good to see everybody. So again, today we're going to be chanting the prayers to Lord Nrsingadev for the protection of all the devotees and everyone in Ukraine and in Russia. And then we'll have a few noticias, as they say, about the situation. And then we will talk about Lord Shiva, whose day it is today, Shiva Ratri. That means the night of Lord Shiva. So here in the United States, it is Shiva Ratri today. So first we'll chant the prayers to Lord Nrsingadev. I am actually in Orlando, Florida right now, and not going to Disneyland. We're visiting the devotees and temple in Orlando. Namaste Narasingaya. Namaste Narasingaya. Allah Allah Tayanai Ranyakashi Urvachaha Jiratam Kanakalaye Yatuna Singa Baratuna Singo Yato Yamituna Singa Vakira Singo Rinayana Singo Singamatim Brahma Joy The Singamatim Brahma Joy Akara Kamala the brain of Buddhist Sringa Davita Hare Rama, Hare Hari Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Sringadev, 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 Maharaj, 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 Haribo, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jai Om Vishnupad, Paramahansa, Paramacharya, all Teta, Satashi Shimad, His Divine Grace Sabaya, Charananda Bhaktivedanta Goswami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, ISKCON Founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Anandakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shidvaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Shri Shri Radhakrishna Gopika Sai Mukunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavan Ki Jai, Mathuran Ki Jai, Jagannatha Swami Ki Jai, Munamaya Ki Jai, Srimati Galasi Devi Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bom. All glory is to the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is to Shri Guru and Gauranga, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale, Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamati Namadi Namaste, Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pajani, Nivashesha Shunyavadi, Paschacha Deja Tarani. So just a few announcements. Of course, I think everybody's pretty much aware of the Ukraine situation. Right now, it's a pretty much desperate situation, as I mentioned before. We don't want to be talking publicly and taking sides on this whole issue because we would endanger the devotees in Russia as well as the devotees in Ukraine. So we're praying for the welfare of all the devotees and actually all the people. So be very careful what you say publicly so ISKCON is not seen as taking sides in this particular conflict situation. However, those of you who wish to help some of the refugees or the devotees who have left Ukraine, there's about 650,000 refugees right now. It's going to increase dramatically. If you go on ISKCON News, there's information how you can send donations to different countries, different organizations, and all the links on ISKCON News are vetted. So Anutama Prabhu, who is in charge of ISKCON News, has made sure that the money will actually get to the people. And I talked to some of my disciples in Europe who are business people, and so far we've arranged for about 15,000 euros, and there's a lot more going for the refugees too. So hopefully this thing will end soon and peacefully, and everybody can go back to their normal areas and continue with their Krishna consciousness. So today we ask everyone to pray, and at the end of this class I'll also make another announcement stating the same thing. So now we're going to go and talk about Lord Shiva. How about that? It's Shiva Ratri, which means the night of Lord Shiva. And first I'm going to do a little PowerPoint presentation, and then we're going to speak some philosophy after that. I think the PowerPoint presentation should go rather quickly, so let's see if I can share it. Yes, I can share it. It's the PowerPoint slideshow. Whoops, I thought I was sharing it. Maybe I can't share it. Anyway, if I can't, then I will just speak. There we go. Okay, I was able to share it. And I am just going to arrange things so I can see if anyone has problems. So, of course, now we're going to talk about the greatest Vaishnava, Lord Shiva. Of course, Lord Shiva says in many occasions that the best type of worship is worship of Vishnu, and even better than the worship of Vishnu is worship of Vishnu's devotee. So Lord Shiva is Vishnu's devotee. Vaishnavanam yatha Shambhu. So oftentimes people ask, why do you say Lord Shiva is the greatest devotee? And actually, sometimes you have different statements, like Radharani is the best devotee. And all these statements are true, that so many devotees can be the best devotee. But Lord Shiva himself, being known as Ashutosh, Ashutosh means easily pleased, easily angered, is extremely merciful. So oftentimes I've talked about what it means to be a member of Lord Shiva's ashrama. Actually, first, Om Gana Timiranda Shah Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshur Militam Yena Tasmai Shikadave Namaha. Offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master's divine grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, who so kindly opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge while I was blinded in the darkness of ignorance. So, in other words, Lord Shiva accepts as his followers some of the most fallen people. It's described as there's witches and pisachas and yakshas and even rakshasas and even demons. So he's so compassionate. So a Vaishnava's greatness is measured by a Vaishnava's compassion, and a Vaishnava's compassion is measured by his tolerance when he's trying to help people. And I think one of the greatest examples of Lord Shiva's tolerance is the drinking of the poison. Of course, as you know, there was the churning of the milk ocean, and many things came from the milk ocean, and even the moon on Lord Shiva's forehead. But actually, this poison came and was threatening to kill everybody in the universe, and Lord Shiva, he actually drank the poison, and therefore he became known as Nilakanta. It means the blue-throated one. And he was able to digest this poison in order to save the whole universe. And of course, it's described a few drops of that poison fell, and venomous creatures were able to take it up, like snakes and scorpions and others. And that's just a few little drops, but you can imagine like an ocean of poison would have actually destroyed everyone. So Lord Shiva manifested his position as extremely compassionate. So as I said before, one can measure Vaishnava's elevation by his compassion. And one who simply sits and chants and is not feeling compassion, anyway, I'm not going to comment because I shouldn't criticize any Vaishnava, but Lord Shiva is not simply chanting, he's chanting, but he's dedicated his very existence to helping the most fallen. So that's Lord Shiva. So, let's go on to the next slide. Whoops. Get a little music there. That's Lord Shiva. I mean, that's Srila Prabhupada.
Shiva is not different from Krishna, but it is added with this material energy. Therefore, Shiva is turned into Juga. Just samudamapi tatha samupaiti karyan govindamani kritam tamam. But somebody is required for distraction. So that distraction part is taken by Shiva, and he is in charge of his tamam.
So there's a statement by Srila Prabhupada when he was quoting from the Brahma Samhita. Shiva is not different from Krishna, but he's also different. It's Krishna who deals, Krishna's expansion, who deals with the material energy. So sometimes it's described that Shiva is like, this is the Brahma Samhita, of course, that Shiva is like the milk, and when the milk comes in contact with certain substances, especially some culture, then it can be turned into yogurt. So you can't go backwards, you can't take yogurt and turn it into milk, but you can take milk and turn it into yogurt. So That's Lord Shiva's position, his ontological position. And as we mentioned on Sunday, last Sunday, that the original aspect from whom Lord Shiva in this world expands is called Sada Shiva. Sada Shiva is actually Vishnu Tattva, a Vishnu Tattva expansion of Krishna. And the Shiva in this world appears through the expansion of that Sada Shiva. And that Sada Shiva expands in different ways. We mentioned a lot of this on Sunday, but some of you weren't listening. One way is through the glance of the Mahavishnu, Saikshata. The glance of the Mahavishnu is known as a Shambhu, like Shambhu, 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 Shivaya. He also appears as the Rudra incarnation through the forehead of Lord Brahma when Lord Brahma gets angry at the four Kumaras. He appears as the Dikpala, the holy Dham. So in many different ways, Lord Shiva is serving the Supreme Personality of God and appearing in this world, different expansions of Lord Shiva. Now, of course, the Rudras, those who destroy the material world, there's 11 of them. And in order to pacify them, in the Bhagavatam it's described that Lord Brahma created 11 Rudranis, that means wives for the Rudras. So what are the qualities of Lord Shiva? So we're going to describe some of the transcendental qualities. His body is fair, with camphor. He has 3 eyes, and he's crowned with a half moon. Graceful, he holds a trident, and his matted locks hold the Ganges water anointed with ashes, and he wears a necklace of glorious bones. So let's describe what that is. So the trident, of course, is a weapon against the demons. His matted locks who hold the Ganges water, that's the whole story about the descent of the Ganges. When Bhagirath wanted to save his ancestors, the sons of Sagara, there were like, I think 60 million or 60,000 of them, who had burned to ashes because they had offended Lord Kapila. He wanted to bring the Ganges down, and finally, after performing a lot of austerities, the Ganges said, I'll come down, but there's several problems. One problem is that I'll have so much force that I'm going to split the earth in two. And so Bhagirath performed great austerities to propitiate Lord Shiva. And Lord Shiva agreed to hold the Ganges water, but when the Ganges water came and hit his head, he understood that the Ganges was very proud, so he actually held the Ganges in his hair and didn't let the Ganges go. And so Bhagirath had to pray, and the Ganges became humble at that particular point. And then she flowed down to the sea, and there's other stories about that too. But she flowed down to the sea, and the sages bathed in her. And so you may ask, why does he have a necklace of glorious bones? I mean, what kind of person is this with bones? Well, these are the bones of great pure devotees, the great sages. So the interesting thing is, just like with great sages, great pure devotees, we don't cremate their bodies because their bodies are spiritual. Just like with Srila Prabhupada. I mean, of course, we don't do this thing with the bones, but with Srila Prabhupada, if someone had some, let's say, hair from Srila Prabhupada's head that was in a clipper or nails, they would actually make a little amulet and put it around their neck, or any of the things that Prabhupada utilized, not only parts of his physical body, but parts for his clothes, his paraphernalia, anything that was connected with Srila Prabhupada is extremely sacred. Like I've heard stories about devotees who had Srila Prabhupada's chadar, and they would wear Prabhupada's chadar on special occasions, not always. So that's why the necklace of the bones around Lord Shiva are called glorious bones. Now, normally bones are very impure, except for conch shell. But the bones of the sages, the bones of pure devotees, are completely pure. That's why we have the samadhis, and we worship wherever the pure devotee is interred in the ground. We have Prabhupada Samadhi, the samadhis of the Goswamis of Vrindavan. If you go around Vrindavan, there's so many samadhis there of great devotees. And so we pray for their mercy because their body has been spiritualized by being engaged in Krishna's service. It's a very important point. Lord Shiva is situated in his perfection as the master of the senses, knowledge, fruit of activities, and the path of achieving perfection. He is the friend of the entire world, and by virtue of his full affection for everyone, he is very auspicious. In fact, the word Shiva means auspicious. And devotees, they can pray to Lord Shiva. Sometimes we find people saying, oh, you shouldn't pray to Lord Shiva, you should only worship Vishnu. But if you understand who Lord Shiva is, that is his position as a devotee of Vishnu, then you worship him as a devotee of Vishnu, not as superior or as a separate god. In fact, Lord Shiva, as we mentioned on Sunday, gave the Ram mantra to his wife Parvati to chant. Of course, later on, Parvati was given the Hare Krishna mantra by Haridas Thakur. And Lord Shiva is always absorbed internally in serving Ram and serving Krishna. His whole life is just a life of service and serving the Vaishnavas especially. And he gives determination to the Vaishnavas. Actually, I should tell this story about my own experience, that many years ago I was not in such good health. And so I understood I had to change my diet. And changing the diet is kind of hard for anybody. And so that night I had a dream, and Lord Shiva appeared to me, and he was laughing at me. He said, I can make it so that if you want, you could live without eating. And I said, no thanks. And then next morning I knew exactly what to do, and since then I've been healthy. He actually saved me in many different ways. So I have a deity of Lord Shiva on my altar, and a meditating deity, not the linga, not the Shiva linga. The Shiva linga is very nice because that indicates that Lord Shiva is our father. The Shiva linga and the yoni indicate that Durga is our mother and Lord Shiva is our father. But I worship Lord Shiva as meditating, as someone who meditates on Krishna, praying for the plight of the conditioned souls like ourselves. So he's very pleased by the goddess Gauri sitting on his lap, and he's served with a lot of paraphernalia, and his associates have handsome forms and graceful actions like his. And like you see little Ganesh there. And of course Nandi is his bull carrier. He's always absorbed in devotion for Lord Krishna, who is not different from him. He sings and dances and other pastimes. He delights his associates. Although he's the Lord of the universe, Lord Shiva always worships thousand-headed Lord Shesh with great love, as if he were his servant. And of course I'll tell a little story of his singing and dancing from the Chaitanya Mangal. Once upon a time, Narada Muni wanted to get some Mahaprasadam. And the way you get Mahaprasadam is you got to please Lakshmi. He wanted to get directly from Lord Vishnu. So he served Lakshmi something like 10 celestial years. And after that, Lakshmi said, I'll give you whatever you want. And he said, I want Mahaprasadam. But Lakshmi had been told not to give Lord Vishnu's remnants to anybody. And so she was a little nervous, or very nervous, because she's a very submissive consort of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Not like some of the gopis who were not submissive. So she's very submissive, so she was very much in anxiety. Finally, she goes before Lord Vishnu and tells Lord Vishnu her dilemma, that she promised to give a benediction, or whatever Narada Muni wanted, but she also promised not to give away Mahaprasadam. This is called a standard conflict, approach avoidance. So anyway, so what happened is the Lord Vishnu said, okay, you can give my Mahaprasadam, but just do it when I'm not looking. And so she gives the Mahaprasadam to Narada Muni, and Narada Muni starts dancing in ecstasy. He can't control himself. He's in so much ecstasy, bhava, symptoms of ecstasy, dancing and chanting and everything like that. And finally, Lord Shiva sees him doing that. He says, "Why are you doing this?" And Narada Muni said, "I got some Mahaprasadam." And Lord Shiva said, "Did you save any for me?" And Narada Muni said, "Oh, I apologize. I did not save any for you." And then Lord Shiva said, "Why not?" And then just look, see if there's anything, even under your fingernails. So Narada Muni looks, and under his fingernails there was a little piece of Mahaprasadam that got stuck. And he got it out, and he gave it to Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva started dancing wildly. And he was dancing so wildly that it appeared like the universe was going to be destroyed, just like we know that Lord Shiva's destruction of the universe is called the Tandava Nritya. That means the dance of destruction. And oftentimes we see different deities of Lord Shiva in that particular position, the dance of destruction. So anyway, so as he was dancing like that, the whole universe was threatened, and different personalities went to Durga and said, "You got to stop him, he's your husband." And so Durga, she somehow or other said, "Please stop." Lord Shiva was very upset. "Why did you tell me to stop dancing? I was in ecstasy." And she said, "Why are you in ecstasy? Why are you starting this today?" And he said, "Because I got Mahaprasadam." And she said, "Did you save any Mahaprasadam for me?" And then Lord Shiva said, "No, you're Maya." She's Maya. She's Krishna's illusory energy. And she got so upset because she's also Vaishnavi. And Vaishnavi means a pure devotee. A lady pure devotee. So anyway, so what happened is that she got so angry she started worshiping Lord Vishnu, and then Lord Vishnu finally agreed to give her Mahaprasadam, not only her, but all of us Mahaprasadam. And that's why we have Mahaprasadam today. Otherwise it was reserved. Very, very special. So if one takes Mahaprasadam, one gets Krishna's mercy. It's called prasadam because it's mercy of Krishna. That's why in this whole problem we're having in the world today with the refugees from Ukraine, we're actually interested in feeding them Mahaprasadam, and they're all going to become devotees eventually, even those who are not devotees yet. So he has many different pastimes. Of course, there's the pastime which I already mentioned, where there was the churning of the milk ocean, and the hala, the poison came out of the milk ocean, and Lord Shiva just gradually or gladly drunk it up. And the devotees prayed to him, "Please save us from this fiery poison which is spreading all over the three worlds." That story we told already. So Lord Shiva is dedicated to auspicious, benevolent work for humanity. Compassionately, he took the whole quantity of poison in his palm and drank it. Of course, as I mentioned before, it turned his throat blue. Another story is this demon, Tripurari. Actually, the demon wasn't Tripurari. Tripurasura was the demon. And this demon was threatening to annihilate everybody. So Lord Shiva it's described that Shiva is the annihilator of the three dwellings of the demons. This Tripurari had like flying cities and everything like that. And Lord Shiva burnt these flying cities to ashes. So he's known as Tripurari, the annihilator of the three dwellings of the demons. Then there's, this is such an interesting story. There's the fighting of Lord Krishna and Lord Shiva over Banasura's daughter. So it says, "Whoever rises early in the morning remembers Lord Krishna's victory in his battle with Lord Shiva will never experience defeat." So let's see if we can tell that story in a nutshell. Once upon a time, there was this girl who was the daughter of Banasura. So Banasura was the great-grandson of Prahlad Maharaj. And let's remember that Lord Nrsingadev had vowed to Prahlad Maharaj never to kill any of his descendants. Okay, so Banasura had this beautiful girl, daughter, Usha, and he was protecting her. In those days, they used to protect the girls by not letting them contact with eligible males until they got married, which was the eligible male that they married. So protecting them, because sometimes the men are like wolves, not sometimes, but generally they are. Especially, I do some preaching in our university in North Carolina called NC State, and the teams there are called the wolf packs, and literally I've seen how the boys are like wolves. So anyway, so Banasura's daughter Usha was protected, but she wasn't protected on the subtle platform because she kept having dreams of this swarthy young man who was looked a little bit like Krishna. And she kept dreaming and dreaming and dreaming about him. And then what happened is that she had a friend whose name was Chitra Leka, who was a mystic yogini, or witch or whatever. And Chitra Leka said, who's this guy you're dreaming about? And she said, I don't know. Chitra Leka brought out a photographic album. In fact, she actually drew pictures of all the men who fit that particular description of the universe. And first she showed Krishna, and Usha says, a little close. Then Arjuna, getting closer. Then Aniruddha, and she said, that's the person. So then Chitraleka said, no problem, I am going to bring Aniruddha to be with you. So Aniruddha was brought by Chitraleka, utilizing Chitraleka's mystic powers, to Usha. And Usha and Aniruddha, they were together for some time until the father discovered his Banasura. So he discovered, and he had a fight with Aniruddha, and actually was able to capture him, and then Krishna had to come. And also I should mention, Banasura, he had 1,000 arms. I forgot to mention that. And he was a devotee of Lord Shiva, and he actually was really frustrated because he couldn't fight with anybody. And he said to Lord Shiva, who agreed that he would actually became a servant of his devotee. So he agreed. When he asked Lord Shiva, he said, I need someone to fight with. And Lord Shiva got angry, and he said, basically, you're going to be defeated. And Banasura actually looked forward to that because actually he had a martial spirit. They like fighting, even if they're defeated. It's fun for them. So, just like someone plays a game of tennis, even if they lose, it's fun. It's not that they just run away after that. So, what happened is that Lord Shiva was defending Banasura. He agreed to defend Banasura. So you had this fight between Lord Shiva and Krishna. And you had so many things. It's stories there in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. But in any case, Lord Krishna won his battle with Lord Shiva. And it's described as a benediction at the end of this particular chapter in the Srimad Bhagavatam that whoever remembers this story will actually never experience defeat. And of course, at the end, all of Banasura's arms, except for 4, were cut off. And Krishna let Banasura live because he was the great-grandson of Prahlad Maharaj. So anyway, that's a really interesting story. If you're interested in more details, read the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, in which this story is told. So, of course, there's more detail to the story. So there was the fight between the Vishnu weapon and the Shiva weapon. So it's described that overwhelmed by the strength of the Vishnu Dwara, that means Lord Vishnu's weapon, the Shiva Dwara cried out in pain. But finding no refuge, the frightened Shiva Dwara approached Lord Krishna, the master of the senses, hoping to attain his shelter. So the Vishnu Dwara actually basically almost extinguished the Shiva Dwara. It's a very cooling effect. So Lord Shiva was defeated. And then there's the story of Rakasura, which we told the other day. And we'll tell it again, since some of you didn't hear the story. Vakasura was a demon who was determined not only to get a benediction from Lord Shiva and become very powerful, but to defeat Lord Shiva himself and use Lord Shiva's benediction against Lord Shiva. This story, of course, is also in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So here's the story. Vakasura was cutting off pieces of his body to offer Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva was going to cut off his head eventually. Lord Shiva appeared and said, "What do you want?" Prakasura said, "I want the benediction that whosever head I touched, that person's head will split into like thousands or millions of pieces. In other words, die. I mean, even if your head splits into 2 pieces, you're dead. What to speak of 1,000 or 100 pieces?" So Lord Shiva said, being very merciful, Ashutosh means easily pleased, easily angered. He said, "Okay, you have that benediction." And Rakasura said, "Ooh, I want Parvati, and I'm going to take that benediction out on you, Lord Shiva." And so he started to chase Lord Shiva everywhere, even up to the spiritual realm. And Lord Shiva had to take shelter of Lord Vishnu. And Lord Vishnu said, "I'll take care of it." And Lord Vishnu appeared as a small Shiva brahmachari holding Rudraksha beads. And he said to this demon, "What's the problem?" The demon said, "I'm chasing after Lord Shiva. I want to kill Lord Shiva and cause his head to split into many pieces and take away Parvati." And Lord Vishnu, being very, very tricky, said to this demon, "Don't you understand? Lord Shiva's benedictions don't really work. I wouldn't trust it. So why are you wasting all your breath and running around? Just relax. You should actually test out the benediction first before you start running around and getting exhausted." So the demon thought, "Yeah, that's a good idea." And he said, "How should I test it?" And Lord Vishnu said, "Well, good way to test it is you just touch it to your head. And if it doesn't work, Lord Shiva was cheating you and you've actually wasted your time running after Lord Shiva. And if it does work, then you'll know it works and you can continue chasing Lord Shiva." Of course, that's not logical, because if it works and your head is split to 1,000 pieces or 1,000,000 pieces, you're not going to be able to continue chasing anyone. So this demon, without thinking properly, of course he was overwhelmed by Vishnu Maya, touched his head, and then his head split in so many pieces and he died, and Lord Shiva was saved at that particular juncture. So this is actually a very wonderful story. It's also there in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is another story. One time Lord Shiva got very angry, became extremely angry, pressed his lips with his teeth, and immediately snatched from his head a strand of hair which blazed like electricity or fire. He stood up, laughing like a madman, and dashed the hair to the ground. Of course, that's the story of Daksha being chastised. And Daksha, at this particular point, basically lost his head, and his head was replaced by a goat head because he offended Lord Shiva. He criticized Lord Shiva, and because of his criticism of Lord Shiva and his ignoring his daughter, who was married to Lord Shiva, because of that, he created a whole conflagration between basically the Brahmanas and the followers of Lord Shiva, and eventually his head was cut off and he got a goat's head. Here's the story. Lord Shiva said, "Since the head of Daksha has already been burned to ashes, he will have the head of the goat and he can perform the sacrifice with a goat head." That is quite embarrassing. I mean, if you show up one day at the temple with a goat head, it definitely would teach you a few lessons. And then at the time of the dissolution, there's descriptions that Lord Shiva's hair is scattered, and he pierces the rulers in the different directions with his trident. He laughs and dances proudly. scattering their hands like flags as thunder scatters the clouds all over the world. Whew. Hold on a second, I gotta do not disturb on my phone. And then the descent of the Ganges, which we talked about before. King Bhagirath requested Lord Shiva to sustain the forceful waves of the Ganges. Then with great attention, Lord Shiva sustained the Ganges on his head. For the water of the Ganges is purifying, having emanated from the toes of Lord Vishnu. And that's the little slideshow about Lord Shiva. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about Lord Shiva. Actually, some more stories I think would be appropriate. Hold on a second. I'm going to get my notes out so I can tell you more stories about Lord Shiva. We already talked about many of the stories. Okay. So another story is the famous Mohini Murti story. What is the Mohini Murti story? Mohini Murti story is, of course, when the demons and the demigods churned the milk ocean. One of the things that came out of the milk ocean was something called the Amrit. The Amrit is like a nectar of immortality. Of course, it doesn't make anyone immortal in an absolute sense, but it gives them a long life, that Amrit. So, when that Amrit came out of the churning of the milk ocean, the demons stole it. And the demons, true to their nature, couldn't agree who was going to take the nectar first. It's like Prabhupada said, sometimes people will rob, and the robbers will say, let's divide this up equally, honestly. Let's divide something dishonest, honestly. So anyway, they were fighting each other, and the demigods had been deprived of this nectar. And so they prayed to Lord Vishnu. When in trouble, pray to Lord Vishnu. And when they prayed to Lord Vishnu, guess what happened? Lord Vishnu appeared as the most beautiful lady named Mohini Murti. And Mohini Murti went before the demons, and the demons went, wow. Basically, they said, we're having a little trouble here. You look saintly. You can divide the nectar up equally between us. And Mohini Murti, being very truthful, said, basically, how can you trust me? I mean, she gave more philosophical points at that point. But basically, she was honest. And they said, no, we trust you. We are bewildered by you. And so she took the nectar and gave it to the demigods instead of the demons. Of course, two of the demons sort of understood what was happening. That was Rahu and Ketu. And Rahu began to drink the nectar, and then the sun and the moon alerted Lord Vishnu, and Lord Vishnu cut off Rahu's head at that particular juncture. So Rahu is the enemy of the sun and the moon. A very interesting story about eclipses. So, this is an esoteric story. So then, after this whole Mohini Murti episode occurred, Lord Shiva, he wanted to see this Mohini Murti form of the Lord. So he prayed to Lord Vishnu, and Lord Vishnu said, you really want to see it? Lord Shiva said, yes. I want to see this Mohini Murti form. So as soon as Lord Vishnu appeared as Mohini Murti, he was playing some ball game or something like that, like tennis or something like that. And the wind blew the clothes off Mohini Murti. And Lord Shiva became so bewildered that he began to chase Mohini Murti all over the world, round and round and round and round. And his chasing, as described in the Bhagavatam, some bodily fluids produced gold. And so even Lord Shiva became bewildered. Muyanti Yatsuriya, by Mohini Murti, by Krishna in the form of Mohini Murti. Other stories that involve Lord Shiva, and there's so many of these stories, is that Lord Shiva was the one who gave Gandhari the benediction to have 100 sons. And of course she did have 100 sons, and those 100 sons were the Kauravas. And very, very interesting story, which we don't need to get into now. And Lord Shiva also gave Draupadi the benediction to have 5 husbands. So that was an interesting story. Before Draupadi became Draupadi in her previous life, she was quite frustrated because she couldn't find a husband. And she really wanted to have a husband. It was a pastime of the Lord. And so she was crying out to Lord Shiva, Om Namo Shivaya, 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 Shivaya Namaha. And Lord Shiva said, what do you want, my dear devotee? She said, I want a husband, I want a husband, I want a husband, I want a husband, and I want a husband, and whatever, 5 times. And Lord Shiva said, all right, you get 5 of them. And she said, no, 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 that's not what I meant. I was just being enthusiastic. And Lord Shiva said, no, you get 5. That's my plan. And of course that was revealed later on by Vyasadeva when the Pandavas, that is Arjuna, had won Draupadi in the Swayamvara, and he brought Draupadi back to see his mother, and he said, Mom, I've actually won something. And his mother, Kunti Devi, said, whatever you've won, you have to share between all the brothers. And Arjuna was shocked. And then Kunti Devi, she looked at Draupadi and said, oh my God, what did I say? But my words can never go in vain. So they had to all marry Draupadi. So that was because of Lord Shiva's benediction. So that's another story. Another story from the Mahabharata is Lord Shiva fighting with Arjuna. Arjuna was performing austerities to get the trident, the Trishula, of Lord Shiva as a weapon, so he would have it to fight against the Kurus. So as he was meditating on Lord Shiva, and also meditating so we could enter the heavenly planets and get some more weapons from the heavenly planets, a big boar started to run after Arjuna. I guess there's some demon. A boar is an animal with tusks. It's like a pig, but you can kill him. So it was running towards Arjuna, and Arjuna naturally, he's not going to sit there and do nothing. He took out his bow and arrows and shot the boar. And when he shot the boar died, and then Arjuna noticed there was one other arrow in the boar. And he saw a big hunter called Karat. And this Karat hunter said, I fired my arrow first. I killed the boar. And Arjuna said, no. I fired my arrow first. I'm Arjuna. And the hunter and Arjuna, they had a fight. And they fought back and forth, back and forth. Finally, the hunter defeated Arjuna. It didn't hurt him. And Arjuna was on the ground just thinking, how could I get defeated? And he started to worship Lord Shiva again, made a little Shiva linga out of the sand on the ground. And then what happened is that he put a garland on that Shiva linga, and he noticed that the hunter had the same garland. Then he understood it was Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva was very, very pleased with him and gave him his weapon. There's another story about Lord Shiva. And so the other day I told the story about Lord Shiva's Gopishvara, and also his Kundeshvara, Kameshvara, and so many manifestations of Lord Shiva that guard the holy dham of Vrindavan, and all the Lord's holy dhams. Lord Shiva serves the Lord in that way by guarding his holy dhams, by making sure that no intruders come. And of course, one time, as I mentioned the other day, Narada Muni wanted to look at the Rasadets. And what happened is that Lord Shiva said, you can't come in because you are a male. Only females allowed in to see the Rasadets. Then what happened is that he told Narada Muni, you can go to Kushma Sarovar, in a particular corner of Kushma Sarovar, and bathe, and you will become Naradi. And he did that. Narada did that. He appeared before Krishna. Krishna didn't dance with him, of course. Krishna said, Narada, you have to stay here and write the Narada Pancharatra, Narada Bhakti Sutras. And Lord Shiva, in this way, he guards the holy name. Even there's a female aspect of Lord Shiva that guards the holy name. That's called Gopishvara Mahadev. And he guards the Vrindavan area. And he bathed in Manasarovara in order to become a female too. So there's a very, very special potency to the lakes and the rivers there in Vrindavan, because you bathe in them and you can realize your spiritual identity. And the gopis also worship Lord Shiva to get Krishna as the husband. So we can worship Lord Shiva, not necessarily get Krishna as a husband, but to actually get the favor of Krishna, get the mercy and compassion. I mean, that's why I pray to Lord Shiva to somehow or other imbibe his compassion. So there's another manifestation of Lord Shiva called Chinta Haran. That means someone who relieves you of all anxieties. And this deity of Chinta Haran, of Lord Shiva, it's a special linga, is near Brahmananda Ghat in Braj. Brahmananda Ghat is the place where Krishna opened his mouth and Yashodamai looked in, and she saw all the universes and herself within the mouth of Krishna. Another story of Lord Shiva in the Holy Dham is when Lord Shiva went to see Krishna, when Krishna was a little baby, because Lord Shiva is a devotee of Krishna. So he wanted to see Lord Krishna, so he knocked on Yashodamai's door. Knock, knock, knock. And Yashodamai opened the door, and she saw this naked sage with a snake around his neck, and with ashes all over him, and of bones around his neck. Bones of sages, as I mentioned before. And she slammed the door. She was scared to death. And so, but then Krishna started crying and crying and crying. No one could get Krishna to stop crying, because he wanted to see his great devotee. Finally, Yashodamai understood what had happened, that she had offended the sage and not allowed the sage to see Krishna. And then she sent some of her assistants out to bring the sage back. And then every day from that point forward, Nanda Ishvara, that's why. Anyway, this happened. Anyway, Nanda Ishvara. So every day from that day forward, Lord Shiva came and played with little baby Krishna. So even Lord Shiva was manifest during the pastimes, the early pastimes of Krishna, not only during the rasa dance where he appeared as Gopishvara Mahadev. So these are some of the stories. We can leave a few minutes open for questions. And basically we want to pray for the mercy of Lord Shiva to become detached from this world, to be able to control our senses. I mean, who's controlling the senses more than Lord Shiva? Lord Shiva is the greatest devotee, and he simply lives without anything, without clothes and everything like that. So you see, the devotees, it's interesting, this is another question that's raised in the Vedic literature, the Bhagavatam. Devotees of Lord Shiva generally become very rich, and devotees of Krishna don't always become so rich. And so the answer to that is that Lord Shiva is very compassionate and sentimental, even with his devotees. Whereas Krishna, he's very strict with his devotees. He says, Yashaham anugraname rishe tadaram shanai. For those who I especially favor, if they're not able to handle the material energy, I may take things away from them. And then all their friends and relatives reject them, and then all they can do is chant my holy names, take shelter of my holy names. Okay, so this is all we have time for today, so we will unmute you all and allow you to ask questions, quick questions. Oh yeah, just one other announcement. as I mentioned in the beginning of this whole session today, if you go on ISKCON News, you'll find a way you can donate to help with the refugees, with our Food for Life programs, to help with the devotees. There are ways to get resources to the devotees and resources to the refugees. And as I mentioned before, I've made arrangements with one of my disciples to help with, I think it's about 10 or 15 euro donation for the refugees in Hungary. Most people don't write the name of that country properly. They write it like someone is hungry. It's Hungary, and the country of Hungary. And I think they're going to be contributing up to 100,000 euros more for the refugees there. There's refugees in Poland and other countries that are bordering on Ukraine. So this is I think it's the largest European refugee disaster since World War II. And hopefully it will end soon. We ask everyone to pray for the welfare of everyone there, not just the devotees, but the welfare of all of our brothers and sisters, all living entities who are suffering due to man's inhumanity to man. This is very, very sick. What is that? Oh. Brisbane is underwater and most flights are canceled. It'll get normal by the time I'm there, don't worry. I mean, I'm not going to be there for another month. Another month? Yeah. More than a month. More than a month. Indra is teaching you a lesson. Okay, and so I think we have about 2 minutes. So anyway, so please pray for the devotees and everyone there. And if you're interested in helping in any way, go to ISKCON News. There's some vetted ways that you can help. So, does anyone have any questions before we end? No, I guess nobody has a question. So anyway, so all glory is to Lord Shiva today. And Sunday here, which is Monday in New Zealand, Australia, whatever, we're going to be speaking more about Lord Shiva, because that's our Sunday program. So we're having 2 Sunday programs. Last Sunday program is about Lord Shiva. This Sunday program is about Lord Shiva, and today is Shiva, the actual day of Shivaratri. Thursday is the disappearance day of Gorkashirdas Babaji Maharaj. We'll be speaking about that, and also doing a program at our Orlando Center on Thursday. So we're in Orlando right now, visiting the devotees and doing some programs and preaching, because that is my service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So thank you very much. I guess that's it. All glory is to His Divine Grace. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada.